Welcome back, and in today's lesson we're going to cover an endgame technique that'll help you beat just about anyone out there in this type of a position where we have worked hard in the middle game, we've won a pawn, and now it's up to us to convert this extra pawn into a win. And this is where beginners struggle a lot because it's quite hard to convert this into a win unless you know the proper technique, and that's what we're going to cover today. And it's a three-part process, starting with step number 1, centralizing the king, which is the most important thing in any endgame. Step 2 is we're going to advance this extra past b pawn as far as we can without, safely, without our opponents taking it. And that's going to distract the opponent's king and bishop, and they're going to be defending so that doesn't become a queen. In the meantime, we're going to do step number 3, which is we're going to create weaknesses in our opponent's kingside pawns on the other side of the board. And because we're going to create weaknesses here and the opponent's pieces are tied up on the queen side, we are going to be able to win these pawns and then queen our extra pawns on the king side and win the game easily from there. That's essentially the technique, and we're going to cover it with a live example now, so let's get right into it. King f1 is the first move, centralizing the king, and our opponent does the same thing. Here, we're not going to play king e2 because we're going to lose that g2 pawn with the bishop eyeing it, so we're going to play g3, and after king e7, you can see our opponent has the same idea. They want to pop out onto c5 and centralize their king and, maybe even win that pawn if we're not careful. So here we're going to try to restrict that king, e4, bishop d3, blocking that pawn from advancing, and e5. And now you can kind of see we're starting to cramp up our opponent's position. Now we're fixing these pawns where they are for now, and they might become targets, right? And that king now has to go the long way around. So we're going to go bishop b5, check, king c7. You can see our opponent's trying to do the same thing, trying to centralize his king and be in a good position that way. So we better hurry up and get our king to the center. Now we're threatening to win a pawn, so that pawn comes forward. We trade, takes, and we kind of pause here and see, okay, now we're already starting to create weaknesses in our opponent's king side on the other side of the board because we're going to keep them distracted on the queen side. We can already see a path for our king to enter into that position and take those pawns. So already we're improving our advantage, we're improving our position, and now we play f4, getting that pawn up and into a better square, and you're going to see why in a second. So king c5, and now black is really doing the right thing in defensive terms, getting that king to d4 and restricting white space. So here we go, bishop f7, and now we're threatening to play f5, and that e6 pawn is going to be pinned because of that bishop, and that's just going to help us either win a pawn or trade bishops. So black needs to play f5. I'll just show you if black played something like bishop here, f5 comes, and then we would either play e takes or f takes, e6, or bishop takes, and this is just a very, very simple win. We've got that extra pawn, which is going to distract the king, and we're going to gobble up these kingside pawns. So the only move for black here is f5, and now that's actually created a couple of weaknesses here. So these dark squares are very weak for black now, so we can kind of see a path in for our king to start taking these pawns. So our whole plan here will be around how can we get the king to e5 and infiltrate the opponent that way. So king to d3, and our opponent is defending well. So we have to get that king away from this area so that we can advance. So bishop to h5, and after check, we go here. Our opponent comes back. We go check. Our opponent comes here, and now we can start sliding across. where we've pushed the king to c5. And now with our next move, we are going to push the king back even further and play king to d4. So you can kind of see we've accomplished step 1, centralize the king. We're starting to do stage 2, which is distract the opponent's pieces with that outside pass pawn. They have to defend, otherwise that's just going to become a queen quite easily. And we've actually created some really good weaknesses to attack on the king side. So now our opponent attacks our h-pawn, we move it out of the way, and our opponent is stuck to just moving the bishop back and forth, because as soon as that king moves anywhere, our king is going to infiltrate, and that's not good. So what we're going to do now is bishop to d1, threatening to come here and kick that bishop out with the pawn. And here we just simply go bishop to b3. We're improving our position. We force our opponent to have to move his bishop. And after bishop c4, our opponent does not want to trade bishops. So bishop f3. And now we start distracting even further. b6. Again, we've got to be careful. We've got to be sure we don't just lose that pawn. In this case, if our opponent tries to take it, we can straight away pick up that pawn and pick up the other pawn and also infiltrate with our king. So our opponent does not want to play king c6, and instead they play bishop c6 because they've got to move the bishop. All the pawns are locked. Moving that pawn to h5 just simply loses it. So bishop c6, bishop to a6. Again, black is just stuck to just moving that bishop back and forth. b7, and now we have finished our distraction because the king has to drop back to defend against the pawn queening, and we infiltrate. And you can see how quickly the position falls apart from here. We've completed steps 1 and steps 2. Step 1 and step 2. So now we take that pawn. Our opponent doesn't want to trade bishops yet, but that's okay with us. Now we've just won these 2 pawns, and the other ones are going to follow. We're going to nicely just block off any sort of defensive entry for the black king. And after our opponent tries to defend that h-pawn, we don't care. We're not phased. We're going to take it, and if our opponent trades, we will just simply win this. Now this is a much easier position to win, but it all started with this position. It's so disheartening when you've worked so hard in the middle game to win a pawn and then you just blow it in the end game. So what I recommend you guys do is set this position up. It's a really good position to practice, and set it up with bishops, with light squared bishops, with dark squared bishops, with knights, with rooks, whatever you want, and just try to convert an extra B pawn or an extra A pawn or a C pawn, or maybe even just if that pawn was here. What if it's not a pass pawn? How would you convert that? Play around, practice as much as you can, and that's how you're going to improve your chess and win so many more games. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.